Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in. I have a new microphone. I hope this helps. I know some people have not been able to hear me, and I do hope that I am improving on this situation. Tonight's topic is something very, very dear to my heart and everybody's heart. And we're going to delve into the topic of healing global disconnect, a tall order and something very, very desperately needed in today's atmosphere. So I want to read a little bit about my statement that I made on a website that is available. If you look it up, it's under healingglobaldisconnect.com. I will be working on that website. The message is up, and the message is this. As a human race, we have become fragmented into nations, religions, social classes, politics, and races. This fragmentation has resulted in clash and fallout in the form of human atrocities. Although we have been able to soar to unlimited heights in many areas of human endeavor, we have yet to accomplish the final and most important frontier, to come together as a united humanity. And this is a call-in show, everybody. I invite you to call in. And I'm not very good at politics, so I'm going to steer away from the politics of it and break the mind map down in a global way so that you can understand how global disconnect occurs, how individual human disconnect occurs, what one has to do with the other, and why it is so important to heal individually in order for us to heal globally. So if you put the mind map up, you will see the 9 panels. And these 9 panels I will describe to you. Some of you already know about the 9 panels and that you understand the breakdown and the flow of the mind map for healing. And then I'm going to also break it down from a global level. So on an individual level, what is occurring is that we are all wounded in our childhood on some level. Nobody escapes childhood unscathed. So if you look at panel 1 and you see the white light in the background, that is our best of our best. That is our light. That is the manifestation or the potential manifestation of what we could be. The dots and shadows all over the white light represent all of the human disconnects in the form of wounds and all kinds of verbal injuries, physical injuries, neglects and abuses, and so on. And primarily I focus on physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, control and smothering. And I also focus on the narcissistic abuse, which is where parents put their own feelings and agendas before the feelings of the child. And then the other abuse that I missed is obviously sexual abuse. So everyone has some form of human disconnect, and this human disconnect then is reacted to. And if you look at panel number 2, you will see the reactions to these wounds. And these are our human reactions to being hurt, physically, emotionally, combination of both. And you could see that panel 2 is sort of like a cracked piece of glass because this represents our broken psyche. It also represents reactions that range anywhere from fear, anxiety, shutting down, dissociating, and the natural reactions that we face when we're in pain and distress. Now, these reactions and woundings are first experienced on a pre-verbal level. So we're not always conscious of them. I call this area of the psyche, panels 1 and 2, the pre-conscious, the pre-verbal time of life. We're infants, we're children, we cannot talk, we cannot process, we don't know how to form cognitions at this point. And so these reactions are very, very primitive, autopilot, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And then when we become more cognizant, when our cognitions go online, as the neuroscientists like to say, then these imprints, these wounds, these messagings become encoded in the psyche. And these messages are usually not very positive because we soak in the treatment that we received from our mothers, our fathers, our society, etc. And then these treatments encode into messages that we feel about ourselves and the world. Messages like, I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough. Messages about the world, like the world is a fearful place to live, and many, many other messages that we now make ourselves and the world to mean. Now, I'm going to jump to panels number 4, 5, 6, and then I'll tie it in with global disconnect, because obviously human disconnect and global disconnect are very intricately interconnected. So if you look at panel number 4, you can see that what happens is when panel 3 feelings and messages are triggered, then we basically discombobulate. We come apart at the seams, so to speak. So if you look at panel 4, you can see that the DNA structure, our internal structure of feelings, our family systems, when disrupted, when we are triggered in low self-esteem and core belief department, then everything falls apart internally and even externally. And this chaos can represent anything from emotional chaos, relationship chaos, financial chaos, spiritual chaos, and any kind of chaos, really. And when people are faced with chaos, this is a very unstable state to be in. So people will then defend against this chaos to reduce, or at least to attempt to reduce the chaos. And they'll do this by creating defense mechanisms. So if you see panel number 5, these little round balls or globes represent isms, defense mechanisms. And these defense mechanisms vary from person to person. Some people defend by drinking alcohol or doing drugs. Some people defend by engaging in porn and sexual acting out. Some people defend by shutting down. Some people defend by gambling. Some people defend by being on their cell phone for many hours of the day. Some people defend by sleeping too much. And we're very creative. So we figure out how to numb ourselves and avoid, and how to defend our delicate feelings so that we can take ourselves out of this pain and at least pretend for a few moments or hours or however long that we are in a safe zone. However, these defense mechanisms do not always work out, and they become our psychological prison, and the drinker becomes addicted sometimes, and then they can't get out of that horrific defense mechanism, or the gambler gets addicted to gambling, and these defense mechanisms then end up exploding or imploding on us. So if you see, if you look at panel number 6, you could see that these defenses break down or they clash with other people. And so this particular panel represents explosions and implosions. From an implosion point of view, I'm talking about when those feelings turn inward, the anger turns inward, the distress turns inward, and then people will turn to self-harm. And on the other extreme, they may turn to suicide. So that would be the implosion. Now, the explosion is just the opposite, where people will express anger and project their anger on others and harm others. And in an extreme case, this represents homicide. So you can now look at these 6 panels as connected. So here's the storyboard. When you're wounded, you react. And when you react, you make it to mean negative core beliefs about yourself. And then these negative core beliefs get triggered by whoever, your husband, your wife, your child, your lover, your boss, your friend, world events, and so on and so forth. And then this triggers chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And this oftentimes just keeps self-repeating and self-infecting. And so people are trapped in this panel 4, 5, 6 zone. I call it the WTF, or the what the Freud. It's hard to get out of because a lot of what traps us in there is very unconscious. And so we're not really aware of any kind of pathway of escape from this living hell. And of course, I see many, many people who are trapped in this repetitive cycle of chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. I usually see people when they're in chaos, or their defenses are breaking down, or when their marriages are breaking down, or when their psyches are breaking down. And so, of course, it's always better to prevent this from happening, which is why the mind map exists as an aspect of multi-generational repair. So you don't hand down this blueprint to the next generation. This is a huge aspect of my multi-generational goal, so that parents and everybody can learn how to make the conscious, unconscious conscious, and how they can work through their issues so that they don't self-infect and implode or explode on other people and stop this horrific cycle. And so I'm going to go over this from a global perspective, and then I'm going to go into the healing part, which is extremely challenging on a global level. And I'll also break it down on an individual level, but I want to go over my global mind map. For those of you who do not know, the initial purpose of the mind map was to create a global system of healing. And the message was that, just what I read, that we have to become a united humanity. And today, in these challenging times, this is playing out right in front of our eyes, and a huge challenge. And so maybe I could shed some light on this matter, because we're at that breaking point. We are now in panel number 4, 5, 6, and heading into 6. So what we could do about it is what I'm going to talk about. And I also obviously want to hear from you. So this particular mind map system was called Join the Human Race, Healing Global Disconnect. And that idea occurred to me in 2001 out of a conversation with an acquaintance. And we were talking about how everything was breaking down, and that we've turned into a bunch of isms. And out of my mouth came the concept, or the sentence actually, of, isn't it time to join the human race? Isn't it time to put our humanity in front of our race and our religion and our politics and our socioeconomic status and everything that I've mentioned, and all the isms that I've mentioned? So let's break it down from a global perspective. And this is how I saw this pathway, and I'm sharing it with you now. So panel 1 represented our original unity. So if you look at the light in the background, that represents our humanity at one, unity. So once upon a time, we were not Black, white, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Ukrainian, Russian, Chinese, American. We were one soul. There was no distinction. When we're born into the world, we're not identified with an ism. We are a being. We are a human being. And what happens then is that the shadows, a shadow over humanity and fracture our oneness, and the challenges of life then create this shattering, if you will, of the human psyche. And so panel 2, from a global perspective, represents how this challenge of oneness is now being shattered. And so instead of feeling supported and loved and in a safe haven of humanity, we now fracture away from this unity. And as a result of this fracturing, we separate and individuate from each other. Now, there's nothing wrong with healthy separation and individuation from a growth perspective, but when we separate ourselves from our own humanity, what happens is panel 3 in a very unsustainable form. So the DNA that's supposed to be structured and bonded and safe and a pathway to climbing to higher levels now becomes it becomes, I call it a psychovirus. The psychovirus of encodings of multi-generational injuries then creates a universal structure for us that is not sustainable. And the separation and individuation then becomes, instead of an individualism that is part of humanity, this is, I'm using now as a metaphor for becoming selfish and not in touch with other people. So if you look carefully at panel 3, you will see the people on the DNA bonds, and some of them are lying around, standing around, hanging around, walking around. But what you don't see is you don't see any interconnection with the people, which then becomes a huge problem globally, because as a global entity, we do not stand together. And if you look at panel number 4, you will see that as a race, a human race, we are no longer stable. We are no longer on a pathway. We are clearly in chaos, metaphorically, as you can see by the picture of panel number 4. And here we are flying off into the ozone, upside down and twirled around and insecure. And in the background is all of this toxicity and uncertainty and so on. And so when we're in this state, we want to get out of the state. And so what we've done globally is we've become these isms. So these little round balls in panel number 5 are my representations, metaphor for the isms of politics, the isms of races, the isms of religions, the isms of socioeconomics, the isms. So these isms fracture us even further away from the light of unity. But if you look carefully at these isms, you can still see that there's a little bit of light in the center of each ism. And that's my metaphor for the hope that lies within each one of us that's ismed off into our political and so on fracturing. And so we have to understand that the challenge today and every day is not only to keep our consciousness in the state of unity, but also to understand that each one of us carries that light and that we're uniquely causal, both in a positive and a negative sense, and that consciousness is causal. And if we stay in the consciousness of unity, if we stay in the consciousness of love and intimacy, then we can beat this thing. As I once read, and I know that many people have said this in many forms, and I'll just say it the way I remember it, that if you're in a dark room, then all it takes is a match to transform the darkness into light. And each one of us now has to take upon ourselves to be that light, because more than ever in these times, we need to be the light in darkness. And I also remember my lesson. I'll credit my Kabbalah 101 class for this lesson. And I remember the teacher saying, how do we fight the darkness? Well, the Kabbalistic view was be the light. So the more that we can individually be the light, that's where we have our causal power. So any questions so far? Any questions in the chat room? Would you like to call in? I'm reminding people to please use any name that disguises your identity. You don't have to use your name. You don't have to, you don't have to do that. You could just invent a name, just as long as I can call you by one. So if you have any questions, or if anybody wants to call in and ask questions about what I've described, and then I'm going to start tying it into how one relates to the other, and then move on to the healing process. Okay, thank you very much. And now is the time that we do have to really put our heads together, and more than our heads, put our hearts together. So I want to talk a little bit about a common topic that I mention over and over again, the topic of power and control versus intimacy and love. So think about it as two different game boards. So let's say one game board is a game of chess, and another game board is the game of checkers, and it could be any game really. Now, the rules for chess are different than the rules for checkers. And so if somebody is in the consciousness of power and control, they are going to be manipulating their game board differently than if somebody is in the consciousness of intimacy, vulnerability, and love. It's pretty obvious, and if it's not, I'll try to make it more obvious, that when you're playing the game of power and control, you're playing the game of disconnection. Okay. Yes, we do need power and control. It's important to hold our boundaries. I'm not talking about that. It's important to keep ourselves safe. However, we still have to have the consciousness of intimacy and love and unity, even if we're protecting ourselves by being powerful and controlling our boundaries. That's very, very important for people to understand. Now, the game of power and control in a manipulative way, in a narcissistic way, specifically what I mean by that is when you put yourself and your own selfish needs before the needs of other people, when you lack empathy, when you're disconnected from your actions and how they impact other people. Remember that we are all interconnected, whether we like it or not. If one of us is hurting, then it's going to impact the people around us. So it's sort of like the pond, the ripple effect. So if you're hurting, that's going to hurt your children, and that's going to hurt their psyche and their circle, and so on and so forth. And this gets bigger on a global basis. And so it's really, really important, therefore, to go back to point A, which is healing individually so that we can be a healthier, globally united humanity. And why is that important? Because these individual wounds blow up. Okay, so imagine your panel one wounds and his panel one wounds, and this family's panel one wounds, and that community's panel one wounds, and this country's panel one wounds. And we're talking about lots of wounds, not only individual wounds, but cultural wounds and so on. And so let's magnify it and amplify it. And what we're now seeing is this huge, to the nth degree wounded humanity. And if we're not taking care of it individually, what are we doing globally? Is we are projecting on each other. We're imploding within, and this becomes bigger and bigger and more deadly. That's what we're creating. We're creating this potential for this deadly implosion or explosion, as I showed you in panel number 6. So that's why these two concepts are so intricately interconnected. If we do not heal individually, we cannot heal as a human race. It's just really difficult for unhealthy, angry, out of control, amygdala like, fight, flight, reactive people in the human race to be constructive and to be united. So I'm hoping to hear from you. I see that there's one person maybe in the chat room, not sure about that, but if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to call, and let's talk about our individual light next. Okay, but I want to know if you have any questions about it, because we are now at the precipice, and sometimes these breakdowns oftentimes lead to breakthroughs. And so this has been a hard conversation. Let's talk about the beauty of the breakdown to the breakthrough. And as you know, individually, sometimes we break down. We're at the brink of divorce, or we're at the brink of death because of an addiction, or we're on some kind of brink. And sometimes these are those aha moments that humble us out and bring us to our knees and create an opening for a shift. And that's what I'm betting on, is that this precipice that we're on today is an opportunity to really show our light, heroically so. We see heroes on the planet. We see people who are standing up for humanity. We see people who are standing up to protect their families. We see people who are standing up to protect the truth, which I equate to the light. And sometimes it's hard to know what the truth is, which is why I don't like to get political, because I honestly just don't know enough about these truths. It's just that when we're in the truth, we are in our authenticity, and we're in alignment, and we're in that place that we need to be to manifest the best of our best. So I see truth as alignment. I see it as sustainable, and I see it as the pathway to healing. And anything that eclipses the truth is unsustainable and eventually breaks down. Because when you have a structure, a building, a concept, anything that is out of integrity, it just won't hold up over time. And it needs to break down, because at that point, it's just too cancerous, if you will. It's not life enforcing, and it's got to degenerate so that something new will break through. And so if there aren't any questions in the chat room or comments that anybody wants me to respond to?
Chatters, don't really see questions. There is a private. Jen said, many of us are connecting through empathy for our brothers and sisters and are leading ourselves with compassion. We came from light and are the light.
Absolutely. Right. And so how do we now manifest that in hostage situations where we're starting to feel, or have felt all along, like some kind of a pawn in these world events? How do we tap into our freedom? And by the way, I have a blog up about this particular YouTube episodes. So check it out in my blog section on my website, psychologicalhealingcenter.com. And, and so how do we do that? How do we tap in? So now we know that what makes us ism and defend that way is fear. Okay, so when we're living in a consciousness of fear, when we're trying to take ourselves away from chaos, we will do anything to block that pain, to numb the pain, whatever it is that we're doing. And so that doesn't work because, again, it's not sustainable. So, where does our light live? Even though we're hostage to the world events on some level, because we're not in control of everything, what we do have control over, let's see if we can identify these things. We have control over our consciousness, we have control over our intentions, we have control over our actions, we have control over our choices, we have control over a lot of these things. And so this is the time to exercise your best of your best and to control what you can control. And so here is where our unique light comes through. And so, what can we as a human race do? Number one, recognize that we are human beings for first and foremost. Recognize that we cannot hurt other human beings, not only because it's not right to hurt other human beings, but because it will reverberate back to us. We cannot live in isolationism. We are intricately and intimately interconnected. The butterfly effect, okay? If a butterfly flaps its wings in another country, then those little waves are going to travel. They're going to travel around the globe. And I know it doesn't sound like a butterfly can make a lot of waves, but a lot of butterflies make a lot of waves, and a lot of people who are in the intention and in the direction of manifesting the message of humanity can make a lot of waves. And when you come together globally with this consistent, clear message of light, then I believe that we can move mountains. And so, how do we move mountains? We move them individually. Some people are artists, some people are musicians, some people are writers, some people process data really well, some people have great brains for medicine. We all have our talents. Some people cook amazing food. And so don't ever think that your contribution is too small. We're all here with our unique talents, and whatever they may be, when we offer it to ourselves, our families, and our our environment, our global world, then we're offering up the best of our best. And so, can you see that a lot of bad makes up a lot of dangerous bad? However, a lot of good makes up a lot of unbelievable, powerful, transformational, paradigm shifting ability for each one of us to be part of this magnificent opportunity. This is how we do it. We do it intentionally, we do it individually in order to create a paradigm global shift. And I really want to hear from you. I know that this is a big topic. And again, here we are sitting at a time where we're at the precipice. And that's why I wanted to do this show tonight, so that I can give my every effort to humanity to be the cause. And I know sometimes I feel really ineffectual and very small, and what can I do when there are all these looming dangers? I just have a very strong sense that it's not the what I can do individually. It's as an influencer, what can I do to influence the light in you so that you can influence the light in others through your art or through your kindness or your support. And this is the time to be extra kind, extra loving, extra, extra. Why? Because we're all in a state of suffering, and we're all in a vulnerable state. So let's at least be the cause of creating something that is going to be of comfort and kindness to right next door, your neighbor, your significant other, your children. Was that a question that came in?
We do have a question, JD. It says, "How do we turn that flight or fights response off when in the heat of the moment when we feel defensive, so that we can have a positive conversation or a productive conversation that isn't fueled by that defensive, disconnected self?"
Perfect question. I mean, aren't we challenged by it? The problem is this amygdala. It's a wonderful part of our brain because it helps us to fight or flee. It's just that when we need to think and be clear and come up with powerful solutions, um, my way is to know that when my amygdala flares up and I see red and I feel this anger, my number one command to myself, I'm not always successful, it's just that I've got to remind myself, as we all do, shut down your reactivity and understand that there is a challenge in front of us. So, point number one, shut down your reactivity. And that just can mean something as simple as don't talk, be quiet, just dial it down, take a breath, take a few seconds to pull back. And then in that gap, we could start to dial down the amygdala and let the cognition come online. And always to see these challenges as opportunities, because they really are. Every single challenge that we're faced with, whether it's picking up more weights at the gym or running some extra laps so that we can achieve a higher level of physical fitness. It's not pleasant. It's just that when we do the work and when we become proactive instead of reactive is where we create the light. And it's so easy to just become reactive. And that's what we're all afraid of. Oh my God, somebody's going to have a reaction and, push that button and the world will blow up. Okay, so that's that's the end game of reactivity. All right, so on a micro level, let's not go there. Let's not detonate ourselves. Let's not detonate our relationships. Let's keep the connections going. So if you're angry at somebody, then make an effort to have that peaceful, healing conversation with them so that you don't continue to explode or implode and you don't break that bond with that individual person. Now, obviously, some people you cannot keep bonds with, and I've done plenty of shows where it's important to keep away from certain people or actually even maybe cut them out of your life. And so if that's the case, then use your boundaries and don't interface with those people, but don't make it worse. Don't create more chaos because you can't interface with those people or you don't have a pathway to empathy with those people. Don't make it worse because, again, it's going to backfire. Just remember, cause and effect. Be the cause, not the effect. Proactive versus reactive. And my favorite line in my book is a quote from Einstein. And if you haven't gotten my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, please download it. It's free. You can also pick up a copy from Amazon. And so you could start learning to take a system gone wrong, specifically your family system, and straighten it out. And then we can start applying it on a grander scale, a grander human scale. So that's our challenge, is to shut down our reactivity to being proactive. And going back to that quote by Einstein in my book, I use it a lot. Smart people solve problems and geniuses prevent them. So we're now at a precipice. We need to be geniuses. We cannot afford to make problems. We cannot afford to be at the back end. We have to prevent. We have to prevent. And the best way that I know of preventing anything is to intentionally shut down our reactivity. It is very, very hard to do. And in some cases, it feels almost impossible because the amygdala kicks in, particularly when your life is being threatened. Everything just goes into this zone where it's very, very hard to concentrate. And so we can just practice the skill and have our intentions, our consciousness set into this consciousness of being proactive and not reactive, and shutting down the reactivity, at least for a little bit, so that we can make our proactive next step. I hope I've answered that question. I would love to hear from you. And I would like to know what your thoughts are about our global situation, and how it's impacting you, and how specifically you can be the light in this time of challenge, and understand how, even though it might feel so dismal, we could still be causal entities. And so we all have to participate in being causal. And no deed is too small, even if it's as simple as calling somebody that you haven't called for a long time, and um, uh, making somebody a meal that you know is not feeling well, or owning your own stuff to people that you have hurt, because that's part of growth. Part of growth is being able to self reflect and self correct. So imagine if everybody on the planet owned their own stuff, and if everyone course corrected on their own life, and if we did this on a micro level and then magnified it on a macro level, what kind of light we can be on this planet. And so no beautiful small deed is too small, because what happens is, when we're in synergy, now I'm going to get into the healing part, okay? Panel number 7, 8, 9. So remember, we encoded all of the wounds, and then we decoded the damage, and now we're going to look at healing and synergy and paradigm shifting. So going over back to number 7, now we could see these orbs, these globes, these isms coming together, and the light in the middle represents our united humanity. So whatever religion, whatever ism, whatever, whoever you identify with, when you bring the elements of wisdom to humanity, now we've got something. Now we've got something. Instead of using our isms to smash and clash and break each other down, if you want to use your ism to bring knowledge, wisdom, talent to the world, please do. This would be an excellent time to do this. And so isms, if they're to be of value on the planet, are only valuable when they are a +1, not when they take away from another. And the light is representative of that. And so when we fix ourselves, when we align ourselves with our mental, physical health, our spiritual health, when we become at one with ourselves, that's when we could be a healthy me that then joins forces with healthy other me's and then form a healthy we. And that's the synergy panel. 1 plus 1 is greater than 2. It's that phenomenon of you plus me now create a third entity. And that's what we need right now. We need that third entity. And so let's be part of creating that third entity, taking each individual light, everybody's wisdom, everybody's micro contribution, and magnifying that. And it would be amazing for me to live to see that happen on the planet. And we actually have the opportunity to have that be right now. We're on a precipice, and remember, we are the cause. So let's really, really capitalize on our micro light to create macro light, because it's our micro darknesses that then synergized in a not good way. Well, maybe I shouldn't even use the synergy thing, but they came together to create this mess in the first place. And so 180-degree turn up the light, turn up your wisdom, turn down your reactions, turn up your kindness, turn up your generosity, turn up your creativity, turn up your voice so that you can be heard. And this is how we're going to win the war between the darkness and the light. And I know that we could do this. And if you feel so that that you can take this message and then spread it to other people, and feel free to share this video or other videos that spread the light, and then we can all just be part of listening over and over to pathways to healing, pathways to synergy, and to start to understand very clearly that we are causal. Each one of us is causal. And some of us are influencers. We're influencers in the world of music, in the world of film, in the world of art, in the world of psychology, in the world of cooking, in the world of anything. And again, nothing's too small. So you don't have to feel like you've got to be a star or a rocket scientist. We all carry this light within us, and now would be the time. And if you feel that you're blocked from your own light, now is the time to do some deep, deep healing, so that you're not sitting there immobilized. You're not sitting there feeling like you're not important enough to make a contribution, or that you're too stupid to make a contribution, or that you're not worthy to partake in a beautiful life. These are core beliefs that actually people struggle with, and the mind map specifically addresses, is debunking these horrible core beliefs. We've got to decode all of these horrible, destructive messages that we have incorporated into the fiber of our being, because they don't belong to us. They're old messages from old blueprints passed down from generation to generation. And now we still have old messages and that are passed down on a grander scale. And it's time to start dismantling these messages that are now infiltrating on a global level and poisoning our minds, our bodies, our souls. And so this is how we become causal. And I decided to do something different than my usual one-on-one seminars that I do, or the individual work that I do. And I'm going to be conducting a mind map webinar starting March 30th from 4 to 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And this is going to be psychoeducational in nature. And it's Healing from Narcissistic Abuse webinar workshop. I'm hosting it. I'm going to be limiting it to 25 people so that I can have people's questions answered. And in this psychoeducational mind map journey to healing, we're going to be discussing issues such as apathy and how that disconnects, and wounds of childhood, and how to heal from these horrible negative core beliefs, and how to create synergy within yourself and your relationships. So I'm personally going to be leading this webinar. And if you are interested, of course, you can always contact me, Dr. Judy at psychologicalhealingcenter.com, or call at the number up there that you see, contact the clinic. And it will be 3 Wednesdays, Wednesday the 30th, and then April 6th. So we're going to be going into April. I'm just looking at my notes. The 30th of March, the 4th of April, and the 6th of April, and the 13th of April, 3 Wednesdays in a row for 3.5 hours. We're going to take breaks, and we're going to share ideas, and of course, learn the mind map and break it down so that you can journey through this and understand every aspect of it. It comes with my Mind Map 9-panel video series, and the PDF of the book, and a download of the journal for recovering from narcissistic abuse. And I would absolutely love to see you there. And so you can also feel free to add individual sessions if you need to the seminar. And it would be it's going to be an honor to teach this course, especially now in a time of chaos. So join me. And back to our topic, healing global disconnect. Originally, that was my mission statement to myself: create a mind map to heal global disconnect. I realized that we have to heal individually before we heal globally. But now we're running out of time. So that's why I decided to do this particular episode, so that we can start being the cause of healing for ourselves and the others, and most importantly, understand that it is our light that is going to transform and shift us from this darkness into this light. And we have a magnificent, exciting, mind-blowing opportunity to individually be part of flipping the system from this doom and gloom to the system of interconnectivity and united humanity. And we all should live to see that day, and may that day be now. And so let's get started with it. And remember, please, no deed is too small. No deed of kindness, no deed of self-correction and self-reflection is too small. So it's time to really, really shine your unique light and understand that we are causal beings. And so inviting everybody to be the cause, take it very, very seriously, and never think that you're not enough to do this, because cumulatively we are all enough to do this. And let's flip this and shift it. So please feel free to call and connect with the Psychological Healing Center. I'm very much looking forward to meeting you individually, whether we work individually or whether we do the webinar together. I'm just personally very excited about being part of the healing of human disconnect and cumulatively global disconnect. Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, if you have that reaction, then shut down the reactivity and let in your light. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. I'll see you next time. And if you've enjoyed my show, please subscribe to my channel. If you need help, please call the number below.